part of, so thank you to them. The Friend administration and faculty, Friend English department, and all its members for everything you guys do to keep this event going each year. And of course, all of you, the wonderful Friend students. So thanks for being a great audience. Round of applause for you guys. So it is now my pleasure to introduce our next guest. She's sitting up here, Gloria Chow. She is an acclaimed author and screenwriter. Her novels include When You Wish Upon a Lantern, which we will have up here for sale, $19 cash or credit. Come on down at the end of the period to purchase a copy for yourself. Rent a Boyfriend, Our Wayward Fate, and American Panda. Her books have received star trade reviews and have been featured on the best of lists of 17, Book List, Barnes & Nobles, and many more. I'm so excited for you to hear from her. Please help me in welcoming to our Writers Week stage, Gloria Chow.
So number one, if you aren't a doctor, dentist, lawyer, or CEO, you are not successful. And she means in life and everything. So as you can imagine, I had a very difficult journey here. Writer was not on any of those lists. Growing up, I didn't read very much. They always pushed me toward math and science, and I stuck to that. So I went to MIT and studied business. Only one writing class for fun for me, not for a requirement. You don't have to take any reading or writing there. And then I decided I didn't want to become a banker, and so I went to dental school. Thought it would be a good fit for me. From day one, I was miserable. I hated it. As I'm sure you can imagine, you are getting other people's spit and blood in your hair. Nobody wants to see you in pain. It was just a terrible fit for me. And I stuck it out, partly because they really wanted me to, and I just couldn't do it at one point. So it was in dental school that I was so miserable that I fell in love with reading. And I fell in love in particular with young adult books. There is something so special to me about young adult books. They cover topics that other ones don't. They're very fast-paced, and they were just what got me through a very difficult week every week for 5 years. And when I first started writing, I mostly did it for myself, just to kind of, get some things down on paper. And it never occurred to me that I could get to be a writer. And it wasn't until my husband asked me, he was like, "You seem to love doing this. Have you ever thought about being an author?" And my first thought was like, I'm not allowed to. Like, who gets to be authors? I know that there are authors, but I almost didn't think of them as people. I didn't think of that as like a job that I was allowed to, probably because of how I was raised. And it wasn't until he really encouraged me that I thought, okay, well maybe I should write a book and just see what that's like. So my first book, American Panda, came out in 2018. It is about a girl who's a freshman at MIT, and her parents want her to become a doctor, and she hates germs, which is something that I discovered in dental school. It's a very salient memory for me. We had one day where they rented out a movie theater for some reason, and they put everyone in the dental school in there, and the whole day was just about how many germs are everywhere. And I remember coming out of that day and just being so hyper aware of it. And then, when I was working with these people with spit and blood and pus flying in the air, I had a really hard time dealing with it. And even in dental school, I noticed my friends don't seem to be having a hard time with this. They can see patients all day long, covered in gross stuff, and they don't even shower. They just go to sleep because they're so tired. And for me, that just sounded so gross to me. And it was just especially exhausting for me because it was just a bad fit. But it never occurred to me that that was a thing. And I had people in my ear telling me, if I leave dentistry, you're a failure. You failed. Why are you failing at dental school when all of your classmates made it? And so for a long time, even as I was considering this career change, I thought that switching was a cowardly thing to do, an easy thing to do. And in the end, I did it just because I couldn't be a dentist anymore. And American Panda obviously was very much And writing that book was very helpful for me. So I put a lot of what I was going through in it. My parents had a very hard time with my changing career, and I wrote a lot about that. And I also wrote with a lot of humor, because that kind of became my coping mechanism. That was the only thing that kind of helped me see it, in a way that was something I could deal with. And so American Piano kind of became like the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding, if you're familiar with it, the first one, not the first two. But it was about Chinese culture. So it was basically finding all the funny things that were happening and trying to just, find the funny parts in it. So as an example, the second thing that my Asian mother told me, if you swing your arms 3,000 times a day, you will be healthy. She really believes this, and this is the swinging I'm talking about. And she will just stand there and count to 3,000 and do them every day. And she used to call me on the phone and be like, are you swinging your arms? I read an article, you have to do it 3,000 times a day. So in American Panda, between every chapter, the mom leaves a voicemail for the main character, May. And in these voicemails are all things that my mom has actually said to me. I did not have to reach far for this character. She's the easiest character I've ever had to write. She came to me fully formed, and all the things that she says were right there. Here's an example of one of the voicemails. May, I read today that using a tea bag more than twice will give you cancer. You're not doing that, are you? You shouldn't use it just once either, a waste of money. Use it exactly twice, okay? Call me back immediately. This is urgent. Oh, and it's your routine, which she always says as if May doesn't know that it's her mom calling. And these voicemails get progressively more ridiculous throughout the book. Another example of one thing that my mom has said to me my whole life. So there is this one region in China where they eat a lot of papaya, it's native there, and my mom, and the women there have really big breasts. So my mom believed eating papaya gives you really big breasts. Whole life my mom was shoving papaya at me, putting it in smoothies, doing all this. It doesn't work. But I put it in the book because I just thought that was like a funny thing. I never liked papaya before. Now I like it, which I kind of hate. I wish I did. But I put it in the book, and the most surprising thing to me after it came out is that readers were contacting me saying, my mom said the same thing to me, my mom did the same thing to me. And when I wrote American Panda, part of it was for myself, and part of it was that I just hoped if there is one other person out there going through something similar to me, I want them to pick up the book and know that they're not alone. They're not the only one going through this. And one of the best parts that came out of this journey for me is that I feel less alone. I hear from all of these readers of all ages, all backgrounds, that tell me, I really resonated with this part of the book, and I will never get tired of hearing those. And it was just shocking to me, and now it makes sense. Of course, that was probably based on some cultural things, but at the time, it just never occurred to me. I didn't have friends growing up who were like that. I also just didn't really talk about my parents to my friends because they didn't understand. They would say things to me like, oh, just tell them you don't want to do that, just say no. It's almost laughable. Like, no, that's not how it works with my parents. The worst was when they would say things like, oh, well, they suck, your parents are just the worst. Which you don't want to hear either, because they're your parents, and that doesn't help anything. And so I just stopped talking about them. It was too difficult. And so it surprised me when people were reaching out and saying certain things in American Panda resonated with them, especially the ones that are hard to talk about. So as an example, May's brother is disowned because he married someone that the parents don't approve of. And I heard from way more readers than I thought that said, this happened to someone, or this happened to me. And everything in American Panda is true. Something that happened to me has happened to someone that I know. And so in some ways I shouldn't be that shocked, but still it's just something that people don't talk about. And I think books are just such a wonderful way to bring people together and to show others, these things that you're not going to have a conversation about, but seeing it in the book is just, feeling not alone is just something that, there are no words to really describe how much that can help someone. So a third thing, first I wanted to just mention, one of the other difficult parts about talking about these things is there are very different interpretations of culture as well. So I know that my parents are very far on the spectrum in how they interpret the culture. They're a lot stricter. They've hung on to traditions that are very old, like from the 50s, because that's when, they grew up there, and then they immigrated here and they never really updated. And so, I have Chinese friends who didn't understand a lot of the things that were going on. And so, You can't represent everyone, and I try not to think about that when I write. I try to be honest with my experiences, and I also try to make it clear, this is one experience. But I think that also makes it more difficult to talk about sometimes because you don't know who's going through something similar. Everybody enters culture differently. Everybody has different experiences, and so I think that is something very special that balance can do. So a third thing that my Asian mother told me, I've chosen the perfect husband for you. I've never met him, but I know his mom, and since she's good, he has to be good too. So this really happened to me. I was dating my now husband. It was very serious. I knew I was going to marry him. And my mom was like, no, you don't understand. Like, his mom was just so great. And it's just one of those things that is so funny to me. And even now when I bring it up, half the time she's like, I didn't do that. And the other half the time she's like, well, yeah, his mom was just so great. And I really wanted to explore a lot of kind of my mom's thinking about relationships and how they work, which went into my third book, which is called Rent a Boyfriend. It's inspired by a real thing that happens in a lot of Asian countries where women feel so much pressure to bring home the perfect boyfriend that they hire a fake actor who will come and just be whoever it is that your parents want him to be. It's gotten so popular that there are companies that specialize in this. You can rent fake family members. It's a whole business. There's a New Yorker article on it that's fascinating. So I brought that practice here to California, to a very highly populated Asian area, and I created a whole company. And the main girl, Chloe or Jingjing, her real name is Jingjing. She goes by Chloe. She hires the fake boyfriend, and she introduces him to her parents. An aspiring surgeon, all the things that they want. And then she falls for the real guy, the starving artist who only makes money by pretending to be somebody's boyfriend. And as you can imagine, that makes her life very complicated because now her parents know him as somebody else and she's falling for real. So this one, I was fascinated by what kind of training the fake boyfriends get, what goes on in their head. This isn't just acting. You are method acting. You are in it. For the 3 days or however long you are on this job, you have to be whoever this person is. And so that fascinated me, so I decided to write dual point of view, so you're in both of their heads and you get to see what it's like for both of them. And this book was also really fun to write because the most common time to hire a fake significant other is during holidays, and Lunar New Year is the big one. And so I decided for this one, we're going to jump from holiday to holiday in the book. We start at Thanksgiving, we have Christmas, New Year's, Chinese New Year's, Valentine's Day, and this was a very different structure. And I had a little trouble at first because I couldn't figure out, before that jump, how do I develop their relationship? I wanted to show things in between. And it wasn't until I figured out that I can show their text messages to each other that it kind of clicked in place for me. The text messages were really fun to write and solve my problem, but they were a nightmare to format. It took me months to get my publisher to put them in a way that was readable. But here's one of the sample texts that I go back and forth. Chloe says, in high school, I told the football star Jerry, I'll never forget his name, that I was impressed by how he lived up to the name of his position. I thought he played defensive line, and I was trying to thank him for backing me up to a teacher who wrongly thought I'd been cheating. But turns out, he was the freaking tight end. And then Drew says, oh no, you inadvertently told Jerry you like his butt? So the text messages were really fun to play with. I also loved that in Rent a Boyfriend. I finally got to use some of my dentistry background. So I wrote it so that Chloe's parents are dentists. The fake boyfriend is an aspiring surgeon. So when an emergency comes up and he has to go into the office, the dad brings Andrew to come along to help. And so we're in Drew's point of view, and he says, human mouths are friggin' disgusting. This was most certainly not in my training. I'd have to tell corporate to add a don't upchuck after contacting human fluids course. You okay, Fangli? Jingjing's dad asked through his mask. The middle-aged patient gave him a thumbs up, unable to do more. I'm not okay, my brain screamed, but luckily my face mask covered a lot. It would also catch my vomit, right? In my year and a half at Rent for Your Rents, I had been covered in spit, yes, when Michelle's mother yelled at me, and a spray accompanied every third consonant. Had worn a mask, yes, at Grace's house because her 99 was 100 and we all had to cover up so she wouldn't get sick. But no, I'd never been covered in spit while wearing a mask that suddenly felt too thin, all while holding tools in a straightener's mouth. To the right, Andrew Andrew Jingjing's father said sternly, and I tried not to look at the puddle of spit as I directed the thick white suction tube toward it. Crap, and I was supposed to be a promising medical student. This might be the closest I'd ever get to having my cover blown. Keep yourself together and the bile down, I yelled at myself. Funley was the last patient today, but I hadn't gotten better with experience. Somehow worse, it seemed. I tried to pretend Funley's mouth was just a canvas and our goal was to create some art. Oh God, it now looks like blood. I mean, red paint to use. Note to self, when possible, lean toward playing the future architect, computer scientist, lawyer, or CEO. Any profession where it's okay to look as nauseous as I feel in a medical setting. This was especially fun for me to write because I felt like I finally got to explain what it felt like for me in the dentist chair the few years that I was practicing. So, number 4 of the things that my Asian mother told me is don't take your pants off to fart. This is a common Chinese idiom. It basically means don't do anything extraneous, don't do anything that's unnecessary. And I always thought that was a really funny way to say it. And in Chinese, it's 不要脱裤子放屁. So, in American Panda, I use this a lot. There are a lot of really weird Chinese sayings that are really funny when you translate them. And so, in American Panda, there's this girl named Yingna. So she is the community's cautionary tale. So I'll read you the first paragraph when you hear about Yingna. Poor Yingna, the Taiwanese American cautionary tale of a girl who chose happiness over honoring her parents and was cut off financially and emotionally. Now she was the pigu of every boomer, all created to support other parents' warnings. Yingna decided to major in English and now lives in a refrigerator box. Yingna had an American boyfriend and who stole all her money. Yingna had one sip of alcohol and flunked out of college. And for my mother, Yingna veered off her parents' career track and now takes off her clothes for quarters. So I had a lot of fun writing Yingna because I think a lot of families have that, maybe it's a cousin or, some star person that you're constantly getting compared to. And you'll find out in the book that Yingna is actually a very successful comedian now. And the main character goes to hear one of her sets, and there's a whole section where she just talks about these funny idioms. And May has been using the "don't take your pants off" part throughout, and then she hears all these new ones. But I really like to use these unique Chinese things that, especially if they're funny, when I can in my books. And it's not even if they're funny, but just kind of interesting. So another one that I've used in several books is in Chinese culture, the number 4 is unlucky. So the word for 4, 4, sounds like the word for death, 4. And so that makes it unlucky. And when I go to Taiwan, my hotel doesn't have a 4th floor. The hospitals never have 4th floors. And it's very prevalent, but it's something that's not known here. And by the way, 8 is lucky. That's why we're doing 8 things today. My Asian mother told me. This is number 4. And in American Panda, I cross out the 4th chapter. And I just have a little note that just says, 4 is unlucky, so we don't have chapter 4. We jump to 5. And then because she's Taiwanese American, I also cross out chapter 13, because 13 is unlucky. And when I had this idea for a long time, and I was just scared to do it for some reason. It just seemed weird. I had never seen it done. And I remember I even called my editor. We were getting close to finishing the book. It was going to be published soon. And I asked her, I was like, is it okay if I do this? And she was like, oh my gosh, this is such a fun idea. Of course, why not? And it was in that moment that I realized, what was I scared of? Why not? It's my book. I can do the things that I want. And that was kind of an epiphany moment of, I really should just be owning, what makes me unique. And I think before when I wrote the book, I hadn't been thinking about that. Mostly because I didn't know it was going to be published. I just was writing it, almost for me and almost in a vacuum. And then once I realized it was going to be published, I think all these other thoughts started coming in. And if any of you are writers, one of my biggest pieces of advice is, to own who you are, to write what makes you unique and not think about, are other people going to get it? Is it weird? Because I think that's where the strongest writing comes from. And so I've tried to hold on to that, with every book that I write. And the 5th thing that my Asian mother told me, Jeremy Lin is the best basketball player because he's Taiwanese and he went to Harvard. My mom really thinks this. She doesn't know any other basketball players. I don't think she's ever watched a basketball game that Jeremy Lin was not in. And I think this is just a really fun example of the pride that you can feel over someone, who you don't even know, but you feel this kinship with. And I grew up in a very tight-knit Asian community. We were a little bit spread out, but these were people that my parents grew up with, who also moved over here. And once a month we would get together. And these were the kind of people you could rely on. They're like a second family. You could depend on them. But at the same time, they were really nosy. They were really in your business. And I wanted to capture that feeling with When You Wish Upon a Lantern. This is my newest book. It just came out last year. It's my first Chicago book. I hope you recognize the skyline. And this is actually Promontory Point that's pictured on here. So this book is about a girl whose family owns a wishing lantern shop in Chinatown. And when she finds out that the shop is struggling, she teams up with a boy from the Mooncake Bakery next door to make the wishes come true for the customers in secret. So this book came about basically from just a spark of an idea where I was fascinated by the Chinese tradition where you write wishes on the side of your lantern and you release them into the air. And these are really big lanterns, think about the Tangled movie. And the first paragraph of the book hasn't changed since my first draft, and it captures why I wanted to write this book. If there was ever magic to be found on this earth, this sometimes wretched, unremarkable earth, it's when I'm standing on the shore of Lake Michigan, the cold water dancing with my bare toes, and I'm looking at a lit up sky. It's not a light with stars or fireworks or a big bright full moon, but lanterns. Paper lanterns with people's wishes written on the side, carried into the never-ending dark night by a fire inside that matches the fire inside the sender's heart. What could be more magical than a sky aglow with wishes and dreams? So this book became my love letter to my culture. My first 3 books are more about kind of some of the difficulties I've had, complicated family dynamics. And this is the first book where I just wanted to write about my favorite things. So it's my love letter to my culture. It has my favorite food, folk tales, holidays, traditions in it. And it also became a celebration of life, where I wrote it in 2020. It was dark time for everyone. And I needed to remind myself that there was still good in the world. And this book, I wanted it to be fully contemporary, meaning no fantastical elements, no supernatural elements. But I wanted to create that feeling that you get, that feeling of magic that you get when you read a good fantasy book. And it really just celebrates, the beauty of everyday moments. But you really have to look for them. Sometimes you have to make your own magic, but there is magic that can be found in the world. And this is something that the main character learns. So she makes wishes come true for the customers, but she can't make her own wishes come true. And I feel like that's just a very relatable thing. It's very hard to go after your dreams. It's hard to know what to do to make them happen. It's even hard to know what they are. And for a long time, even after I had switched careers in the sense that I wasn't working as a dentist, I wasn't looking for jobs, and I was trying to make it happen, I was questioning myself every single day. And it's really hard sometimes to make that jump, and I just wanted to explore them. So When You Wish Upon a Lantern also has that very tight-knit community that I talked about. I wanted you to feel like you were part of this. You knew everybody's gossip, you knew their secrets, you knew what everybody was like and what shops they owned. And there's a lot of intergenerational friendships where the main characters, one of the main missions that they have for the wish granting throughout is there's these 2 older people in the community. One is a widow, one was recently divorced. And they've been flirting a little bit, they have crushes, but they aren't, making any steps. And so their goal is to kind of create opportunities for them to see if something can happen. And so that relates to the 6th thing that my Asian mother told me, which is we came to America for a better future for the family. So I really tried to capture this in all my books, but especially When You Wish Upon a Lantern. And I think this is a beautiful thing. It's also a tough thing, because I think that is why there was so much of what I call Asian guilt. This feeling of, my parents sacrificed so much for me. I think that's why I dedicated 5 years of my life to trying to be a dentist, even though I knew from the start that I hated it. It was terrible for me. I just felt like I have to try to make this work for them. And so I think that's a really difficult thing where there isn't really any right answer, where my parents were coming from a place where they wanted me to be okay, which I understood. It's hard to be an author. It's hard to make a career out of it. But at the same time, I think the biggest problem was number 7. My mother said, I don't know how to communicate because of how I grew up. So with American Panda, as I started writing the mom side of it, I realized there were so many things I didn't know. Because the way that they raised me was they would tell me what to do, they wouldn't say why, and I was just expected to do it. And I made all these assumptions about the why. And I didn't realize they were assumptions at the time. I thought I knew what was going on. But for the sake of the book, for the first time, I forced myself to have an honest conversation with my mom about why I wanted to change careers, about what I was going through. And I was terrified. I had no idea how it would go. I honestly thought maybe this would be the thing that broke us, me changing careers. They had made it clear they were not supportive of it. And I was shocked that when we had that conversation, none of her reasons were what I thought they were. That conversation actually ended up being one of the chapters toward the end of the book, with my mom's permission. And this idea that I just had no idea for this long just amazed me. And so that's how I got the idea for my second book, Our Wayward Fate, which is all about miscommunication. I wanted to explore this idea that, the two sides can be coming from good places, they can have good intentions. But if you don't talk about it and you don't tell each other what you're thinking, it can still lead to some pretty disastrous results. So Our Wayward Fate has a little bit of a mystery. It takes place in the middle of nowhere, Indiana. She's the only Asian girl in an all-white town. And when another Asian boy shows up, at first she's excited, and she's confused when her mom tells her, don't talk to him. I don't want you to have anything to do with him. And she doesn't say why, and so she starts trying to figure out what's going on. And the more she digs, the more these deep, dark family secrets going back centuries start to come out. There's a second storyline from 17th century China, which is a retelling of one of China's most famous folk tales called The Butterfly Lovers. And the two stories will meet at one point, and then you'll know what is going on. So, with American Panda, I ended up writing a lot of kind of these honest things that I was going through. And I did talk to my mom before it came out because I wanted to make sure some of the things, she was okay with. And the thing that surprised me most is number 8, the 8th thing that she told me. She said, thank you for telling these stories. I was really surprised. I thought that she would be really upset, but she read my book, and it actually changed some of the way that she thought about some of these. She just didn't know my perspective of it, and I think that's just a beautiful example of what books can accomplish. I think they can do things that movies and other media just can't. There's a way that you step into the narrator's shoes that only books can accomplish, and I think that's what made me fall in love with them in the first place. So I thought, now that you know me and my family a little bit better, we play a game. I'm going to tell you 3 statements. This is 2 truths and a lie. So one of them's the lie. I want you to figure out which one is the lie. So I'm going to read them to you first, and then once you've heard them all, you can pick one and we'll go through. Number 1, my grandmother believes that eating 7 eggs a day is the best health advice in the world. Number 2, my mom thinks that to grow taller, you should try to jump really high every day. Number 3, my mom thinks that I should marry someone older because once I hit menopause, the men will put pause on the marriage. That's why it's called that. And he needs to also be old and wrinkly then too, so that there's less of a chance that he'll leave me. Okay, number 1, grandmother eating 7 eggs a day. Who thinks that's a lie? Go ahead and clap. Number 2, to grow taller, you can jump really high. Number 3, you have to marry someone older because of menopause. I think enough of you have it, and you are correct. So great job. That is something that my friend's mom did say, though. But not my mom. So I will congratulate you. That was fantastic. So I left a little bit of time in case there are any questions. So feel free about any topic. It doesn't even have to be something that cover today.
Do you still swing your hand 3,000 times?
Great question. I never did. Yeah, I didn't do a lot of the things my mom told me to do. Clearly, I'm a writer. I didn't listen to a lot of things. So yeah, I've never done that. Although, it is funny when you walk in Chinatown, you do see a lot of the old, they are doing that. There is something about the culture where they love doing that. So.
Excuse me. Did your mom tell you to clean your room when she was putting a lot of stuff in it?
My mom actually didn't really care about a clean room. That actually didn't come up very much. She had the peculiar things, but that wasn't really one of them. Good question, though.
How do you say 44 in Chinese?
44?
Yeah.
44. So that actually comes up in my new book because for some reason, Taipei 101, which is one of the tallest buildings, the tallest building in Taipei, for some reason doesn't have a 44th floor, but they have a 4th floor, which I think is interesting. So there's a lot of different things around it's called tetraphobia. So 4 is a big one. 44 is a big one because they just think, oh, there's 2 of them, you're more likely to die. There's also other things like 74 is bad, and that's actually all in this one. I can't remember all of them, but 74 is bad, and 94 is bad. 94 is bad because 9 is Joe, and Joe is a homophone for long, so it's like, I don't know. There's like all these funny stories. 14 is especially bad in China because in Cantonese, the word for 14 sounds like you'll die really soon. So there's actually a lot of these, and most of them involve 4s, but there's like different permutations of it. So that's a good question.
Do you think 3 is a bad number or bad luck? Yeah.
4?
It was actually 4.
You mean 4?
Yeah.
Yeah. I used to not. It was never a thing for me. And then and that actually isn't something my mom was like hugely about, but I knew people growing up, like I knew someone who like got as many 8s as they could in their phone number, so they were big on the lucky ones and the unlucky ones. But weirdly, after writing all these books, I am a little weird about the number 4 now. I've noticed. I'm like Leah, I'm not superstitious, I'm like a little stitious is something that ties in about her in there. So. That's a great question. So she's asking about the process. Once I have an idea, how do I develop it? This has changed a lot throughout. I'll tell you more how I do it now because I feel like I got better with experience. So the thing that I've learned throughout my books is it is so important to have a hook, a book that you can describe in one sentence, right? Or even the title, like Rent a Boyfriend, that tells you what it is. So I like to have a good title because sadly that matters a lot, and like a one-line pitch before I even start, and it has to be something that feels very commercial. And then I go from there, and it has to be an idea that I'm so excited about exploring that I'm okay working on it for a couple years, because that's how long it often takes. And from there, the most important thing to me is figuring out the characters. So everything, like my books always revolve around character, is who they are at the beginning and who they are at the end and how they change. And the idea has to be what makes them change. And I don't start writing until I know very clearly who they are, what their voice sounds like, and all the big beats that they're gonna hit. When are they what's gonna make them start changing? Where are they in the middle? And what's the big way that it's resolved in the end? And I plan out a lot more now than I used to. It makes for so much of a better story. And I also sell on proposal now, meaning I write a few chapters and a summary, and then I send that out to editors so I don't have to write the whole book. And so you have to have it pretty clearly in your head and on paper so that the editors can know enough that they can potentially want to buy it. And I do that mostly just because it's so much less time than having to write the whole book, not even knowing that it's coming out. It's just a career thing. But I also write screenplays, and that has kind of helped me to kind of really figure out the big beats, because movies just, it's all about character, you know, it's so much of it is just you have to know every single beat that's gonna happen, and so I kind of used all of that together to kind of figure out, and I know quite a bit before I even start writing that first page. It's a great question. Oh, a favorite Chinese movie. I can't remember the name of it now. I watched a lot growing up. So growing up, this is more for nostalgia, but we watched a lot of the Sun Wukong, like the Monkey King. Like my parents would drive really far. There was like one video store like really far away that had Chinese things, and we'd get a stack and we'd come home and we'd watch them. There were Chinese dramas we watched that I don't even know the name of because we would watch an episode every night. So I feel like those ones for nostalgia reasons are kind of my favorites. I watch anime too, but that's Japanese. But yeah, I feel like I have to go with the Monkey King because that's just so nostalgic for me. Good question.
What's your favorite book?
Favorite book? That's a hard question because I feel like it depends on my mood. I'm a very mood reader, like what I'm feeling, I want to read. I'm trying to think. So this is kind of a popular series, so sometimes I feel bad promoting it. But a series I read recently, because I'm starting to write mystery, that I really loved is the Thursday Murder Club series. So that one is about like an old folks home. They're all retired and they meet on Thursdays to try to solve cold cases. So that's just one I've read recently. I don't know if it's my favorite. It's too hard to pick a favorite, I'm sorry. It depends on what I'm in the mood to read. But that was a recent one that I really liked. Someone had one over here, is that right?
Oh, okay.
Where can I rent a boyfriend?
Where?
Yeah.
In Asia? Sorry, I don't think there's one here. I thought about doing like a fun promotional thing. Actually, I saw an ad recently that said something like, I will zoom in with your family and pretend to be your significant other for a price or something. I saw an ad, someone told me about an ad somewhere. So they're out there. You can probably find something. Yes. Oh, that's a good one. I eat a lot of seaweed. So my favorite Chinese snack growing up, I eat a lot of like the dried seaweed growing up. Like my dad would bring a container and I'd eat the whole thing. And I still eat that a lot when I'm writing. So I feel like I have to say that one even though it's a little less, unique and fun. But yeah, it's a good question. I ate a lot of hockey growing up. I love hockey. Just on the other hand. Yes.
Would you say LeBron James or Michael Jordan?
Oh my God.
For what?
LeBron James or Michael Jordan is the GOAT of basketball.
The GOAT? I don't know much about basketball. I mean, my mom would say Jeremy Lin, but I don't know enough. I mean, it feels like in culture, Michael Jordan's more known, but LeBron James is just now, and the game changes over time. So it's hard to say. I would say I'm not I'm not an expert, so you shouldn't ask me. If you want to ask me about curling, I curl a lot. I can tell you about who the best curlers are.
Who's the best curler?
Okay, that's a good question. Right now, I think my two favorites are probably, okay. If I had to pick, can I pick a team? How's that? I'm gonna pick the Scottish men's team, the Mount team. They're the best because even though they didn't win gold last time, but they have the best sweepers, and now it's pretty amazing. Yes, my husband and I are very serious curlers. We compete at a high level. We have been in the top 20 for a couple years in mixed doubles, so that's my other hobby that I hope one day to learn. So when we play doubles, I don't sweep as much. It's a different format. There's two people, and I feel bad, but usually it's one female, one male, and usually the male has to do everything, and I feel bad, but I'm in the house calling the strategy. So basically, I throw two, and then I'm in the house calling the strategy, but he sweeps all the rocks. So yeah, feels a little unfair. When was the last time I went to Taiwan? Right before the pandemic, I think it was 2019 fall. I went, and then I wanted to go again just because I'm writing a book now that is all in Taiwan. But It's a whole thing, right? If you're gonna go, you gotta go for a couple weeks because of the time change and everything. And my grandma's now in Shanghai, so if I go back, I probably go to Shanghai. So, but sometimes maybe we'll meet in Taiwan. But what's the most difficult part about writing a book? I think it's staying positive on the days where you feel stuck and having the confidence to kind of push through it. For a while, I kind of would go back and forth. Like sometimes I'd be like, oh, I love drafting. Drafting is the best. And then I get to revising and I feel like, oh, revising's so hard. And then sometimes it would switch. And I worked very hard recently to make myself love every step, to find something I love about every step, just because it is such a privilege I get to do this, and sometimes I have to remind myself where I came from. Now I haven't been a dentist for 10 years, which is wild to think about, but I try to hang on to that and remember, there's something that you love about this, and to really hold on to that. And I think there are just some tough days where you feel stuck, there's something wrong, you're not sure how to fix it, and you just have to know that you will find it. And the hardest days for me are the days where I'm not writing, where I'm just sitting and thinking, and it feels like I'm getting nothing done. But you just have to do that. You have to, wait until that idea comes to you to move on. And writing words that aren't helping isn't helpful. And I think that's the hardest part for me, is like being okay with the process of brainstorming and letting myself have time to think. I always feel impatient, like you're always waiting on editors or producers or studios to get notes to you. And so you feel like you have to hurry, but you have to let the creative process take its time. Thank you so much for your attention.
Come on down, meet Gloria Chow, buy one of her books, $19, great audience, we'll see you tomorrow.